You ever stay in a hotel that just felt wrong? Like everything looks fine on the surface, clean lobby, polite front desk, soft jazz playing overhead. But there's something underneath, something that doesn't match. That's what this place was like. And by the time I realized what was really going on in room 806, it was already too late to pretend it was just in my head. This happened in 2022. I travel a lot for work. Nothing glamorous, just software training and onboarding for companies that are too cheap to hire a full-time tech person. That week, I was sent to a mid-sized city in Indiana. I won't name it, but it's one of those places where the downtown area is just a couple of blocks, surrounded by miles of strip malls and abandoned factories. I was booked into this older hotel right off the highway. Not a chain, just a tall, kind of outdated building with faux marble tile and that old hotel smell. Part air freshener, part mildew, part something else you can't name. The front desk guy was young, polite, clearly bored. He handed me my key card and said I was in 806. I remember asking if there was a gym or something, and he just said, "No gym. Ice machine's on 7. 8's been kinda weird lately, so if anything acts up, just call down." That comment stuck with me, but I figured he meant plumbing, or maybe the lights flickered. Nothing paranormal crossed my mind at the time. Room 806 looked fine, a bit stale maybe, smelled faintly like old carpet and furniture polish. The lamps worked, the bed was made, the window overlooked a rooftop and a stretch of empty lots. Standard business hotel stuff. My first night there, I got back around 8:30 p.m. after dinner with the client. I changed, watched some TV, and got into bed around 11. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up for no real reason. The room was dark, but I could see the LED clock glowing red. The air felt dense. I don't know how else to describe it, the kind of heavy, still air you feel before a thunderstorm, but it was completely silent outside. I didn't hear anything at first, but after maybe 10 seconds, I noticed a sound, soft and slow, coming from the vent above the closet. It sounded like breathing. I stared at the vent for a solid minute. It was faint, but rhythmic, not mechanical, like actual breathing. I got up, climbed onto the chair, and put my ear near it. Still breathing. It stopped the second I touched the metal. I waited. Nothing. I climbed down and shook my head, telling myself it had to be a pipe or something in the HVAC. Just old building noises. I went back to sleep eventually, but I left the bathroom light on that night. Just in case. The next morning, I asked the front desk guy if someone else was staying next to or above me. He looked at the screen for a second and said, "Nope. 806 and 805 are the only ones booked on 8. Floors above are maintenance only right now." I didn't say anything else, just nodded and went to grab coffee from the lobby. That second night, everything started normal. I got back to the room, FaceTimed my girlfriend, showered, and got in bed around midnight. At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of whispering. It was coming from the closet. I froze. It wasn't TV static or wind or anything like that. It was whispering, software urgent. Like someone was having a hushed conversation just on the other side of the closet door. The words weren't clear, just the cadence of speech, a female voice, fast and breathy like she was trying to explain something too quickly. I stayed in bed, holding my breath. I thought maybe someone was in the room next door and the walls were thin. But it didn't sound like it was coming through the wall. It sounded like it was coming from inside the closet itself. I slowly reached over and turned on the lamp. The moment the light flicked on, the whispering stopped. I got up, walked to the closet, and pulled the door open in one motion. Nothing, just my coat, some hangers, and an ironing board. I even knocked on the back wall of the closet like an idiot. Solid.
I stood there, heart pounding, every hair on my arm standing up. I closed the closet, sat on the edge of the bed, and just listened. Nothing. The room was quiet again. I left the TV on low for the rest of the night. The next morning, I felt stupid. Told myself maybe I was dreaming, or half asleep, or just stressed. But I couldn't shake how real it had felt. I even looked up the hotel online, seeing if anyone else had ever posted anything weird. There wasn't much, but I did find a single review from 2019. It was only a few lines long, but it said, "Nice staff, clean rooms, stayed in 806. Something was wrong with the closet, felt like someone was in there at night. Didn't sleep." That was it. I tried to tell myself it was a joke, or that the power of suggestion was making me paranoid. Still, that night I asked to switch rooms. The front desk guy gave me this look, like he'd been expecting me to ask. He didn't say anything. Just clicked a few keys and handed me a new card. 707, one floor down. 707 was quieter. Or at least, it felt that way. Nothing happened the first night. Or the second. I started to relax a little. I didn't ask questions. I just wanted to finish my training sessions and get home. But on my final night there, this would have been a Friday, I took a long shower, packed my stuff early, and got in bed around 11:30. Sometime around 2:45 a.m., I woke up needing water. The little fridge was across the room, near the window. As I was pouring it into a cup, I heard something faint above me. A thud, then again, louder. Then something scraped, like furniture being dragged. It was coming from directly above me, which meant room 806. I stood still. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The noises continued. Short bursts, a knock, a scrape. Then silence. I picked up my phone and went to the hallway. The elevator was at the far end, but I took the stairs. They were cold, dusty, clearly not used often. As I climbed, the noises faded. Everything was dead quiet again by the time I hit the 8th floor. I walked toward room 806. My ears were ringing in the silence. The hallway lights on 8 were dimmer, like they were on some kind of power-saving mode. The air smelled musty, like the floor hadn't been cleaned in a while. The door to 806 looked off. It was slightly open. I stood there for a while, debating whether I was really about to do something this stupid, but I had to know. I pushed the door slowly. The room was dark. Not even the LED clock was glowing. It was empty, furniture covered in white sheets, dust everywhere. I stepped inside and said, "Hello?" just to feel less crazy. No answer. I turned toward the closet. It was open just a crack. Before I could move, something whispered, not a voice, a sound, like breath and static rolled together, right behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. When I looked back at the closet, it was wide open. I swear I didn't hear it move. Inside, pressed against the back wall, was a faint imprint, like someone had been leaning into it. You could see the shape, shoulders, a head, like someone had stood there for a very, very long time. I ran. I didn't close the door, didn't go back to my room. I went straight down to the lobby and sat there until sunrise. I checked out early and told the guy at the desk everything. I don't know what I expected. An apology? An explanation? He just sighed and said, 806 was supposed to be sealed. Someone must have forgotten to relock it. I asked what that meant. He looked at me, like really looked, and then said, "There was a guest a few years ago. Something happened. We don't talk about it." That's all he would say. To this day, I don't know what I experienced. I've stayed in a lot of hotels since then, big ones, small ones, old ones, new, but I've never heard breathing through a vent, never heard whispering from a closet, never seen a ghost, if that's even what it was.
All I know is I don't take room 806 anymore. I always ask to switch, no matter what floor it is, and I haven't slept with the closet door open since. Not once. Because every time I start to drift off, I swear I can still hear it. That faint whisper, trying to tell me something I never want to understand. That hotel room should have been empty, but something was watching. Coming up, a new house, a fresh start, and a voice in the dark that doesn't want to leave. It started the first week we moved into the new house. This was 2021. My wife and I had just bought a home in a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania. It wasn't anything fancy. 3 bedrooms, old fireplace, slightly uneven floors, but it had character. We were both in our early 30s and had just gotten out of the apartment phase of life. We were excited. The house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac and the neighbors seemed friendly enough. The previous owners had left in a hurry, apparently moved for work. The real estate agent said they barely stayed a year, which we thought was weird, but not a deal breaker. The first few days were exactly what you'd expect. Boxes everywhere, microwave dinners on the floor, and laughing about things like, where did we put the forks? Nothing felt off, not yet. I remember the first strange thing clearly though, because it was so small that I almost didn't notice it. I was in the upstairs hallway, painting the trim along the baseboards while my wife was out shopping. It was around 3 in the afternoon, bright, sunny, quiet. I had music playing quietly from my phone on the stairs behind me. At one point, I reached for the paintbrush and paused. I could hear a soft creak from one of the bedrooms, the one we hadn't set up yet, just an empty room with a few unopened boxes. I turned the music down and listened. Another soft creak, like someone shifting their weight. I said, "Hello?" out loud, almost laughing at myself. But when I walked into the room, it was empty. The window was open though, so I figured it was just a breeze. I closed it, went back to painting, and didn't think much of it. The second thing happened 2 nights later. We had finally gotten our bed frames set up and were settling into our first real night in the new place. It was just after 1 a.m. when I woke up to what I can only describe as a short, sharp knock. Not on the front door, not on the wall. It sounded like it came from inside the bedroom, like the floor or maybe the closet door. I sat up, heart beating just a little faster. My wife was still asleep. I waited, listening. Nothing else happened. Just silence. In the morning, I checked the closet and under the bed, like a paranoid idiot. Nothing there. I even tapped around the walls and floor to see if I could recreate the noise. I couldn't. That next week, the noises became a regular thing. Always soft, always at night. Sometimes it was a creak down the hallway. Sometimes it was what sounded like footsteps on the stairs. Light, deliberate, always stopping the second I got out of bed to check. My wife didn't believe me at first. I mean, she didn't not believe me. She just chalked it up to settling wood, or maybe my nerves being on edge with all the change. I wanted to agree with her, I really did, until the night she heard it too. It was almost 2 a.m. I was already awake, staring at the ceiling, when I felt her grab my arm. She whispered, "Did you hear that?" I nodded. We both stayed quiet. From somewhere downstairs, we could hear what sounded like drawers being opened. Slowly, not slammed, not yanked, just opened, one by one. We crept to the top of the stairs. The house was completely dark, but we could both hear it. Then, nothing. A soft click, like a cabinet shutting gently. That was it. I called down, "Hello," trying to sound firm like I wasn't freaked out. There was no response. I grabbed the baseball bat from under the bed, flipped on the lights, and went down. We searched the whole house together. All the doors were locked. All the windows shut. Nothing was out of place. No signs of anyone breaking in. And all the drawers closed. My wife didn't talk much the rest of the night. I think she was trying to come up with a logical explanation. I didn't push her on it, but from that night on, she kept the hall light on while we slept. About a week later, things escalated. I got home from work before she did. I was in the kitchen making a sandwich when I heard something fall upstairs. Not a crash, just something small, like a book dropping. I froze for a second, then grabbed the bat again. It sounds dramatic, I know, but at that point we'd heard enough weird things to stop treating them like normal. I went upstairs, checked every room. Our bedroom was fine. Guest room, fine. That weird third room, the one we still hadn't touched, was closed. The door, I'm not kidding, had a fresh scratch down the middle, like something had dragged a nail or maybe a key from top to bottom. Inside, the box of old books we hadn't unpacked yet had tipped over. One of the books was open on the floor, and here's the part that made my stomach drop. The page that was open was an old collection of ghost stories. I don't even remember packing that book. I called my wife, asked if she had been in there. She hadn't. That night we agreed to leave a phone recording while we slept, just to see if anything weird would show up. We set my phone on the dresser and left a voice recorder app running all night. The next morning, we listened. At first, just silence. Then some of our shifting, coughing, the usual. But around 3:08 a.m., we both heard it. A voice. Software like a whisper. Right near the microphone, it said one word. Help! That was it, just that one breathy, desperate word. We played it over and over. It was in the room with us, not from outside, not a neighbor, not the wind. We didn't sleep the next night. We just stayed up watching movies, trying to stay distracted. But even with the volume up, we kept glancing toward the hallway. Eventually, we called a local paranormal investigator. I know how that sounds, but at that point, we needed someone to tell us we weren't insane, or maybe that we were. The guy was actually normal, professional. He walked through the house with some gear, EMF readers, thermal cameras, all that stuff. He didn't say much until he got to the third bedroom. That's where he stopped and looked around. He said the energy in the room was heavy, which honestly didn't mean much to me at the time. He asked if we had a history of the house. We didn't, just the fact that the last owners hadn't stayed long. He recommended doing some research at the city records office, see if anything unusual had ever happened on the property. So we did, and that's when we found it. Back in 1987, a teenage girl who had lived there had gone missing, reportedly left in the middle of the night. No signs of forced entry, no goodbye note, no clues. Just vanished. The case went cold. The family moved out a year later. But here's the thing. The room she slept in, it was that third bedroom, the same one where the book fell, where the scratch appeared, where we heard the voice. We don't know what happened to her. No one ever did. But I can't help but wonder if she's still here somehow, trapped. Or worse, reaching out to anyone who'll listen. We moved out after that. A month later, maybe less. My wife didn't want to stay another night after hearing that recording. I didn't argue. To this day, we still have the audio file saved in the cloud. I won't share it. Not because I'm scared of people hearing it, but because deep down, I'm scared of what else it might invite. Because sometimes, late at night when things are too quiet, I still hear that voice in my head, that single word, repeated like a memory I never asked for. Help. They moved out, but not everything stayed behind. Next, a night shift worker starts hearing things, until it's not just hearing anymore. I used to work nights at a call center just outside of Denver in one of those squat brick buildings that look more like medical offices than anything else. It was one of those jobs people only keep for a year or two, enough to pay rent or get by until something better comes along. I was in that just getting by stage of life when this happened.
This was late 2019, right before the world got weird for different reasons. I worked the overnight shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., which meant fewer calls and more time to do nothing. There were maybe 6 of us on that shift. 3 phone reps, 1 floor manager, and 2 security guards who mostly hung around the lobby or watched the parking lot cameras. You'd be surprised how often someone tries to break into a call center thinking they'll find money. Anyway, we all had our routines. I sat at Station 9, same cubicle every night, brought the same coffee mug, wore headphones most of the time just to drown out the buzzing from the overhead lights. Those lights, by the way, always flickered, especially near my row. No matter how many times maintenance fixed them, they kept flickering. Low hum, like a bug zapper in slow motion. The first weird thing happened on a Tuesday, I think, around 3:30 a.m. Quiet night, no calls. I was half asleep in my chair, playing solitaire on my phone when I heard a voice behind me. Clear as day, a woman said, "Can you help me?" I turned around fast, heart immediately in my throat, but there was no one there. I stood up, looked over the cubicle wall. Nobody. I even walked to the hallway just to double check. All the other reps were either on break or had headphones in. I told myself maybe someone was joking around, or maybe it was a voice from one of the customer calls echoing through a headset. That kind of thing happens sometimes when someone doesn't mute properly, so I let it go. The next night, it happened again. Same time. 3:30 a.m. I was filling out some paperwork when I felt a cold draft sweep behind me, like someone had opened a door right at my back. I turned, expecting to see someone walking by. No one, just that same flickering light overhead. Then the phone on the desk next to mine rang. Now, here's the thing. Those phones weren't supposed to ring. Everything comes through the headset system. When the desk phones rang, it usually meant someone had called the direct line from inside the building, which wasn't allowed. I walked over, picked it up, and said, "Hello." There was static. Then the line went dead. I checked the call log. No number, just unknown. I told my manager, Sam, about it. He brushed it off, said the phones glitch sometimes and to just unplug it if it happened again. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. I even spun around once or twice thinking I saw movement from the corner of my eye. Nothing there. Night 3 is when I stopped thinking it was in my head. I was microwaving a burrito in the break room, cheap dinner, I know, when the lights flickered again. The break room was fully glassed in on one side so I could see the cubicle floor from where I stood. It was all empty, just rows of darkened monitors and abandoned desks. Then I saw it. A person. Just for a second. Standing at the end of my row, Station 9. I saw the outline in the reflection of the glass wall. A woman, long dark hair, shoulders hunched slightly. She wasn't moving, just standing there, behind my chair. I whipped around to look. The cubicle floor was empty, but I swear to God she had been there, clear as day in the glass. I walked back, heart pounding, trying to play it cool, but my hands were shaking. I checked the security feed on my desktop. Each station has access to basic floor cams. Nothing showed up, not on my aisle anyway. But at 3:31 a.m., right as I was looking, the feed glitched for a second. A single frame of distortion, just enough to make my stomach drop, like when an old VHS tape hiccups. You know something happened, but you didn't catch it. That morning, as we were packing up to leave, one of the security guards, Joe, pulled me aside. He asked if anything odd had happened on my shift. I hesitated, then nodded. Asked why. He just shrugged and said, "The system pinged motion in your aisle at 3:30, but the camera didn't catch anything. Happened last week too." I asked if it was a glitch. He said maybe. But he looked just as unsure as I felt.
I went home that morning and didn't sleep. I ended up doing some Googling, just trying to find out anything about the building. It was built in the early 90s, nothing old. But I found one old forum post, a weird thread on some local ghost hunting page from 2014. Someone claimed their sister worked in the same building back when it was a different company, and that she kept seeing a girl in a dark hoodie who would disappear near the back stairwell. That back stairwell was right behind Station 9. That same night, I got to work and found a sticky note on my desk. It wasn't from anyone I knew. It wasn't in anyone's handwriting I recognized. It just said, "She only talks to the quiet ones." That was it. No name, no context. I showed it to Sam, who laughed and said someone was messing with me. Maybe one of the night guys was trying to prank me. I tried to laugh with him, but I was already done pretending this was normal. That night, I kept my headset on the whole shift. No music, just silence, listening, waiting. At 3:29, I turned toward the hallway behind the cubicle wall and asked out loud, "Do you need help?" Nothing. I sat still, focused. Then my monitor glitched, just a flicker, then black. It came back after a second, but the desktop background had changed. To a photo, black and white. Grainy. A still frame from a camera maybe. It showed Station 9. My chair. My desk. And someone standing behind it. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking down at me. I unplugged everything and left. Didn't even clock out. I just got in my car and drove until the sun came up. The next morning, I texted Sam and told him I was quitting. He didn't even ask why, just said, "Okay. I get it. I don't know what's in that building. If it's tied to the old company or someone who died there or something worse, but I know what I saw. And whatever she is, whatever she wants, she still hasn't left. Because a few weeks ago, a guy I used to work with texted me. He still works nights. Still sits near Station 9. His message just said, "Hey, weird question. Did anything ever happen with the phones at your old desk? One keeps ringing. No number, just static. He doesn't know what I saw. And I didn't tell him. Because if she's still there, still waiting, then maybe it's better not to speak her name. Maybe silence is the only thing keeping her away." Have you ever heard a voice that sounded just like yours? I work nights at a local UPS warehouse. Not glamorous, but the pay's solid, and I actually kinda like the rhythm of it. Everyone keeps to themselves, and the quiet helps me think. Usually, I'm one of the last guys out since I clean and lock everything up. This happened a few months ago, and I've only told 2 people about it. I still think about it at least once a week, and before you assume, no, I wasn't on anything. No lack of sleep. I was completely sober just like every night. But what happened that night still messes with my head. It started like any other shift. Boxes, belts, caffeine. I was halfway through a podcast, just moving packages through the scanner. At around 2:15 a.m., most of the crew had already clocked out, and I was alone in the northeast corner of the warehouse where we store the overstock. That area is always colder for some reason. Even in the summer, it's got this weird, drafty feeling, like the air doesn't move right. Anyway, I was stacking a few boxes when I heard something behind me. It was my voice. Clear as day, my exact voice, saying my own name. Derek. It was quiet. Flat. Like how I'd say it if I was calling out to someone I didn't really like. At first I froze. I turned around slowly, expecting to see one of the guys messing around, maybe playing my voice through a speaker. But there was no one. Just stacked pallets and dim security lights flickering overhead. I stood there for a second, waiting to hear it again, but nothing came. I told myself it was the podcast glitching, maybe jumping back in the episode. I popped out one of my earbuds, but the podcast was still playing, and they weren't even talking about anything close to me or my name. I shook it off and went back to work, but 20 minutes later, it happened again. This time, louder. "Derek!" It wasn't coming from behind me, though. It was to my right, just past the rack of damaged parcels. Again, the same exact tone. No inflection, just my voice calling out to me like it was trying to get my attention, or maybe mock me. Now I was creeped out. There were only 2 other guys still on the clock. One was sweeping by the loading dock, and the other was in the break room. I checked. Both of them said they hadn't left their spots in a while. No one had a Bluetooth speaker, nothing that could have explained what I was hearing. I told myself again it had to be the podcast or something weird with the acoustics in the warehouse. It's got high ceilings, metal walls, weird echo pockets. Could have been a truck backing up and I misheard it. But then, just after 3 a.m., something else happened. The intercom clicked on. That's not super weird. Sometimes the night manager will use it to page for cleaning or notify if there's a security sweep. But this time, there was no announcement, just a breath. It sounded like someone had pressed the button and was just standing there, breathing. Long, shallow inhales. No talking, no static, just listening. I walked over to the console and stared at the mic. The red active light was on. No one was near it. And then I heard it again, this time through the intercom. Same tone, same voice. "Derek, come here." But it wasn't just creepy because it sounded like me. It was creepy because it didn't sound played back. It sounded live. I stepped away from the console and checked the hallway that led to the offices. Empty. The main lights were off and no one had passed through the motion sensors, but that voice kept echoing in my head. The way it paused after saying my name, like it was waiting for a response, like it was daring me to answer. I didn't sleep when I got home. Couldn't. The next night, I was on edge. I didn't even wear my headphones. I wanted to hear everything, every click, every shift, every noise. The first few hours were uneventful. I started to feel stupid about being scared. Told myself maybe it really was just a prank, and I overreacted. But around 1:40 a.m., one of the pallets collapsed in the overstock section. Just came down on its own like it had been nudged. That's when I noticed something. The CCTV monitor by the break room was looping back and forth. Usually, it switches between feeds every 10 seconds. But this one was stuck. It kept showing the camera from aisle 6. The footage showed a man standing perfectly still in the shadows behind one of the shelves. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He wasn't moving. He was just watching. I thought it was frozen, but then he blinked. And the worst part? He looked exactly like me. Same hoodie I wore the night before, same hair, same stance, but his face was just blank. I ran to aisle 6. Of course, no one was there. When I got back to the monitor, the feed had returned to normal. Now I was panicking. I called one of the night leads who worked the week shift and begged him to check the cameras from the previous night. Told him I thought someone was breaking in. I didn't want to say I'd seen myself. I didn't want to sound insane. He told me he'd check and get back to me. At 4:15 a.m., I got a text from him. It just said, "Dude." What the hell am I looking at? He attached a screenshot. The image was from the loading dock camera at 2:37 a.m. the night before. It showed someone standing at the very edge of the loading bay, just outside the security fence. The figure was tall, thin, back turned to the camera. The lights were casting long shadows, so the details were hard to make out, but there was something wrong with the stance. Too rigid, almost like a mannequin. Below the image, he sent another message. "Have you ever sleepwalked?" I haven't. Not once in my life. I left work early that night and told my supervisor I wasn't feeling well. The next few days, nothing happened. I took a couple shifts off. When I came back, I avoided the northeast corner. I started sticking close to the break room or the active loading zone, where at least one other person was around. Then, one night, I got to work and noticed something on my locker. Taped to it was a photo, a printed still from the security cam. It was me, asleep in my car. I recognized the hoodie I wore last Thursday. The photo was taken through my windshield. My eyes were shut, my mouth slightly open. Someone had taken a picture of me sleeping and had access to the internal camera system. There was no note, nothing written, just the photo. I reported it, of course. The warehouse manager said he'd look into it. Security did a sweep, changed the alarm codes, checked the door logs. Nothing showed up. No break-ins, no employees staying after hours. I asked for the security footage from that night, but they told me the camera system overwrites every 72 hours, and the locker footage was already gone. Funny how that works, right? Now every time I'm there, I feel it. Not a presence exactly, but an echo. Sometimes I'll hear a footstep behind me when I know I'm alone. Or I'll hear someone mumble my name from behind a stack of parcels. Always soft, always my own voice. I don't even respond anymore, because part of me thinks that's what it wants, to answer, to follow the voice, to meet whatever, whoever it is. And maybe the scariest part? I'm starting to think it is me, or some version of me. One that never clocks out, one that watches from the other side of the cameras, and every night I get a little closer to hearing what it's going to say next. But I don't want to know, because if it ever says anything other than my name, I think I'll finally answer.
If that last story didn't rattle you, this next one just might. Imagine waking up in a hotel room and realizing you weren't alone, and never were. What would you do if the thing inside didn't need to knock, because it was already inside?
Have you ever been in a hotel so quiet it almost doesn't feel real? I travel a lot for work, mostly corporate audits, which means long weeks alone in rented cars, airports, and cheap hotels. You get used to the blandness. Every room smells faintly like carpet cleaner. Every continental breakfast has the same stale bagels. It all blends together eventually. But last February, I was sent out to Boise for a last-minute job. There weren't many hotels left that week. Some tech conference had filled the city. So my company booked me into this older place on the outskirts of town. Not a chain hotel, just one of those generic off-brand inns with the word suites in the name, even though there's nothing suite-like about them. When I pulled in around 9 p.m., the lot was empty. And I don't mean slow night empty. I mean no cars. Just me, the receptionist's beat-up Subaru, and a row of flickering parking lights. The guy at the front desk was in his 50s, balding, and seemed like he hadn't slept in a few days. He checked me in without much small talk, gave me a key card and told me I'd be in 204. I asked if the place was under renovation or something, since I didn't see anyone else around, and he just said, "Nope, just you tonight." That was the first red flag. The second was the elevator. It worked fine, but when the doors opened on the second floor, the hallway was pitch black, no motion lights. I literally stood there for a few seconds, waving my arms like an idiot, before one overhead panel finally buzzed to life. The hallway smelled like old mop water and something faintly sweet, like a candle that had burned out hours ago. My room was at the far end. Keycard worked fine. The room was fine. Old carpet, heavy curtains, one of those noisy under-window heaters that kicks on like a lawnmower. I dropped my bags, plugged in my charger, and collapsed on the bed. Here's the thing, I always deadbolt hotel doors. Always. I don't care how safe the place looks. It's just habit at this point, so I know I lock that door. I watched some YouTube, texted my girlfriend, and eventually drifted off. I woke up at exactly 3:17 a.m. I didn't hear anything. I just woke up, like something tapped me on the shoulder in my sleep. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the heater. But here's where things start to get weird. My suitcase was open. I hadn't touched it after dropping it beside the bed, but now it was unzipped, clothes folded out onto the floor, like someone had been searching through it. I sat up, confused. The light by the entryway was on. I was sure I had turned everything off before bed. I always do. It's part of the wind-down ritual. Lights off, curtains drawn, charger plugged in. But that light was on now. I got up slowly and checked the room. Nothing was missing. The door was still locked. The deadbolt was engaged. No windows open. Nothing broken. It didn't make sense. I checked the closet, the bathroom, under the bed. Nobody. I stood there in the middle of the room, trying to convince myself that maybe I had just forgotten. Maybe I had opened my suitcase before bed and just forgot. Maybe I'd left the light on. I've had long weeks before. I was tired, jet-lagged. I eventually turned the light off and climbed back into bed. But then, as I was lying there, I heard footsteps, not above me, not in the hall, in the room. They were soft, like socked feet on carpet, moving from the bathroom area toward the desk, then stopping. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to listen, trying to feel if there was anyone else in the room. But I didn't hear the door open. I didn't hear the heater kick off. And then, the voice. It came from inside the room, from the corner by the closet. Just one word. "Hey." It was low, calm, male, not loud enough to wake anyone in another room, if there had been anyone else in the building. I froze. My entire body tensed up. It didn't feel like sleep paralysis. I could move if I wanted to. I just didn't want to, because if I moved, if I sat up, I'd have to see what was there. The silence stretched on. I didn't breathe. After maybe a minute, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and flipped on the flashlight. The room was empty. Every corner, every crevice. Nothing. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed up with every light on, heart pounding, watching the door until morning. Around 7:30 a.m., I went downstairs to the front desk. The guy from the night before was gone. A younger woman was working now. I asked her if they had surveillance cameras in the hallways. She looked confused. "No," she said. "Why?" I asked if anyone had access to master keys for the rooms. She told me only housekeeping, and the front desk had that, and housekeeping hadn't come in since it was a slow week. I asked if anyone else had checked in after me last night. She clicked around on her computer and said, "Nope, still just you." That afternoon, I got reassigned to a different hotel closer to downtown. I didn't argue, but 2 days later, I got a call from the same front desk. The older guy from night one. He asked if I'd accidentally left a shirt behind. I told him I hadn't, that I'd checked everything twice. Then he said, "Well, we found something weird." He paused. I waited. "We found a note under the mattress in your room, folded. It was written in all caps. Just said, 'I stayed in your room too. Thanks for the bed.'" I felt like ice was crawling down my spine. I asked if he was joking. He said no, that they were turning it over to the manager, maybe even the police. I asked if he'd checked the cameras in the lobby. He just sighed and said, "We don't have cameras." To this day, I don't know if someone actually came into my room. The door was locked. The bolt was set, but something about that night felt wrong, like someone had been there already, maybe hiding before I even walked in, maybe in the closet, maybe under the bed, and whoever it was, they didn't need to knock because they'd never left. Hotel nightmares are one thing, but deep in the woods, there's no front desk to call for help. This next story takes us to a remote campsite where something was waiting just beyond the firelight, and it smiled like it already knew you. Have you ever looked at someone and just known something was off? Not because of how they dressed or spoke, just something in the eyes. Like they knew something they weren't supposed to. Or maybe you weren't supposed to see them at all. This happened 2 summers ago. My girlfriend at the time and I were doing a little cross-country trip. We weren't hardcore campers or anything, but we liked the outdoors, hiking, stargazing, disconnecting. You know, we were somewhere in Wyoming, heading toward Grand Teton, and stopped for the night at this remote, government-run campground. It was nothing fancy, a gravel loop with maybe 8 or 10 tent sites, a single bathroom structure in the middle, and that was about it. No ranger station, no cell service, just forest, mountain air, and the occasional screech of birds we couldn't name. It was already past 7:30 p.m. when we pulled in, and there were only 2 other sites occupied. One by an older couple with a huge truck camper, and another by a solo hiker guy who waved at us from behind a propane stove. We picked a spot tucked into the trees and started setting up the tent. That's when I saw her. A girl, maybe 12 or 13 years old, wearing a white shirt and baggy gray shorts. She was just standing on the trail, maybe 30 feet from our site, facing toward us. Not moving, not walking, just watching. At first I thought maybe she was with the older couple, a granddaughter or something, but when I looked again, a minute later, she was gone. My girlfriend saw my reaction and asked what I was looking at. I said nothing, because, well, it was probably nothing. A kid exploring, or maybe I imagined it. We'd been driving all day, I was sun-drained and hungry. We finished setting up the tent, ate some leftover sandwiches, and tried to enjoy the quiet. It actually was pretty peaceful out there. No traffic, no generators, just wind rustling through pines and the occasional crack of twigs. The couple turned in early. The solo hiker packed up around sunset. My girlfriend and I sat outside with a tiny lantern, watching stars start to creep in through the treetops. Sometime around 10:30, I went to brush my teeth at the bathroom hut. It was a short walk, maybe 90 seconds from our tent. Just long enough for the lantern light to fade behind me as I made my way in the dark. The building itself was basically a concrete box with a flickering fluorescent overhead and a single stall. No mirrors, no sinks, just the basics. As I stood there brushing, I heard something outside. A footstep, software gravel crunching. I assumed it was another camper heading over, but when I stepped outside to head back, no one was there. I turned my headlamp on and scanned the woods. Nothing. But that prickly feeling hit me. Like someone was still nearby, watching. I walked back to the tent a little faster than I normally would have. When I got back, my girlfriend was already zipped inside. She said she was feeling cold, so I climbed in and we settled under the blankets. Around midnight, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. It was that sudden, bolt-upright kind of wake-up, like my brain had hit a tripwire. My girlfriend was still asleep. That's when I heard it. A giggle. Not loud, not playful, just a dry, breathy giggle, the kind kids do when they think they're being sneaky. I slowly turned toward the mesh window of the tent. And there she was, the girl, standing just outside the tent, her face half lit by the moonlight. Smiling. She wasn't doing anything, just staring straight through the mesh. I sat there frozen. My mind immediately started racing. What the hell is she doing? Is she lost? Was she sleepwalking? Where were her parents? I whispered my girlfriend's name. No response. I didn't want to unzip the tent. Something deep in my chest told me not to. Instead, I sat up and said, as calmly as I could, "Hey, are you okay?" She didn't answer, just tilted her head slightly, still smiling. I reached slowly for the flashlight next to the sleeping bag, turned it on, and aimed it through the mesh. She was gone. No footsteps, no rustling, just gone. I unzipped the tent halfway and peeked out, scanning the tree line with the light. Nothing. The woods were still. The kind of still that makes your skin crawl, like the trees were holding their breath. I woke my girlfriend and told her what I saw. She said I must have been dreaming, that it was a trick of the light. I wanted to believe her. The next morning, I asked the older couple if they had grandkids with them. They looked confused, said it was just the two of them, always had been. I asked the solo hiker too. He said no. He'd been out there for 2 days and hadn't seen anyone younger than 30. That didn't sit right with me. I decided to walk the trail where I'd first seen the girl the night before. Maybe she'd come from one of the nearby forest access paths. About 10 minutes in, I found something. A sock. White. Small. Stuck in the branches of a bush like someone had tossed it, or it had snagged on the way through. I took a picture of it and left it where it was. Back at the site, I told my girlfriend I wanted to leave early. I didn't explain everything, just said I didn't feel great about the spot. We packed up and hit the road. A few weeks later, back home, I found myself thinking about the campground, about the girl, that blank smile, that giggle. Out of curiosity, I searched the name of the campground online. Third result down was a forum post, old, dated almost 6 years ago. It was a thread titled, "Anyone else seen the little girl near campground name?" The user described exactly what I'd seen. White shirt, gray shorts, appears at night, smiles but doesn't speak. There were 3 comments. The last one was from someone who claimed to be a former park ranger. He said that years ago, a family had gone missing in that area. Parents were found in their tent, having died of carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty camp stove. Their daughter was never found. No trace, no body, just gone. The ranger wrote, "There were reports in the months after of people seeing a girl alone in the trees." We searched the area with dogs. Nothing. It was like she vanished. We always assumed she wandered off and got lost, but the sightings, they kept happening. I stopped working there after the 3rd one. I still have the photo of the sock on my phone. Sometimes I wonder if I should have taken it. Turned it in. Tried to look harder, but a deeper part of me is glad I didn't, because whatever I saw in those woods, whatever smiled at me through the mesh, it wasn't looking for help. It was looking for someone to stay, and maybe, just maybe, someone eventually did. Let me just say this up front. I don't believe in ghosts. Never have. I've always thought most paranormal stories were just exaggerations. People scaring themselves in the dark, but I can't explain this. What's been happening to me for the past few weeks, I've told no one. Not even my girlfriend, who stays over sometimes. Mostly because I'm scared she'll think I'm losing it. Hell, maybe I am. All I know is this. Every time I try to fall asleep in my house, something laughs. And it sounds like it's coming from right next to me. I bought this place about 5 months ago. It's a small 2-bedroom house just outside of Phoenix. Decent price, quiet neighborhood, exactly what I needed. I'm 31. I work in software engineering remotely, and after years of saving, I was finally able to move out of my cramped apartment and into something that felt like mine. The first few weeks were great. I painted the walls, got a dog, Bella, a pit mix I adopted from a rescue shelter. She's sweet, kind of lazy, but she barks at the mailman like clockwork. I put in new blinds, upgraded the thermostat, mounted a giant TV in the living room. Every little improvement made it feel more like home. It was quiet out here, which was honestly a huge relief after years of city noise. You could actually hear yourself think. Some nights I'd sit outside with a beer and just enjoy the stillness. That stillness became a problem. It started one night around 1:30 a.m. I had stayed up watching something dumb on Netflix, probably some comedy special. When I finally turned everything off and climbed into bed, I was just lying there, sort of half asleep, drifting. That's when I heard it. Just a small chuckle, quiet, but close. Too close. It was one of those moments where your brain kicks in before your body does. I froze, eyes open, didn't even breathe for a second. It sounded like it came from behind me, not in the hallway, not in another room, behind me. In my room. I sat up, immediately flicked on the lamp. Bella was still asleep on the floor by my dresser, tail twitching. I scanned the room, closet door cracked open, blinds shut, nothing out of place. Maybe it came from outside, I told myself. Maybe a TV from one of the neighbors. I even went to the window and looked around. Total silence. My street was a dead zone after 9 p.m. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day I told myself I'd imagined it. Just auditory processing glitching out from sleep deprivation. I even Googled it. Turns out it's pretty common to hear stuff as you're falling asleep, so I forgot about it until it happened again. Same scenario, around 1:45 a.m., lights out, eyes closed, body just about to slip under. Heh, a little louder this time. Like whoever or whatever it was had gotten bolder. I bolted upright and turned on the lamp. Bella was already awake, ears perked. Now this part messes with me, because Bella stared straight at the wall behind the bed. The exact spot I'd thought the sound came from. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. Her tail was stiff, not wagging, and I swear her eyes tracked something moving, even though there was nothing there. I slept on the couch that night with the lights on. The next few days were quiet again. I tried to move on, talked myself down. Maybe it was in my head. Maybe Bella was just reacting to me being spooked. But then, things started shifting. It wasn't just the laughter anymore. Doors began closing by themselves, not slamming, just quietly clicking shut. At first, I thought it was airflow, maybe the AC kicking on, but I tested it. Every vent, every room. No airflow would make a door close gently like that. Then there were the cold spots, random pockets of freezing air in my house. Sometimes in the hallway, sometimes in the kitchen, not drafts. I'd stand in one spot and feel the hairs on my arms stand straight up while the rest of the room felt normal. One night I woke up to Bella whimpering. She was hiding under the coffee table, which she's never done before. I called her, and she wouldn't come out for over 10 minutes. Just stared toward the hallway, ears flat, tail between her legs. I started recording myself at night, just using a voice memo app. Most nights, I'd wake up to nothing but white noise. But then one file, one from last Tuesday, changed everything. Around 2:14 a.m., you can hear me shifting in bed. Then, silence. Then my voice. I said, "Who's there?" I have no memory of saying that. None, but the worst part is what came after. A full 6 seconds of dead silence, then right next to the microphone, loud, crisp, like someone was sitting on the edge of the bed and leaned in. I stopped sleeping after that. I called a friend, Marcus, and asked him to crash at my place for a couple nights. Didn't tell him why, just said I'd been feeling anxious and didn't want to be alone. The first night he stayed over, nothing happened. We played some Xbox, stayed up late, passed out on the living room floor. Second night was different. We were just starting to fall asleep. Me on the couch, him on the air mattress, when we heard it. Not faint this time, not subtle, laughter, loud, clear, like someone was standing between us. 3 short bursts. Heh, heh, heh. We both sat up at the same time, looked around. Nothing. Bella was barking now, full-on snarling at the hallway. We searched the entire house, every door locked, every window shut, alarms still armed. Nothing was out of place. Marcus didn't sleep. He just sat on the couch, eyes wide, holding his phone like a weapon. The next morning, he packed his stuff and said he'd catch me later. He hasn't answered my texts since. Last night I tried sleeping at my girlfriend's apartment. I didn't want to explain everything, so I just said my AC broke and I needed a night away. She didn't question it. I tried to relax. We watched a movie, had dinner, and eventually went to bed. And that's when I heard it again. This time, it came from her hallway, just past midnight. A single low chuckle. Heh, she didn't hear it. But I did. And then Bella started whining from the kitchen, like she wanted to leave. I checked the hallway. Nothing. All the lights off, doors still locked. I left her place at 2 a.m., drove around until sunrise. I think it followed me. I don't know how else to explain this, but it's not bound to the house. Wherever I go, it finds me. Not every time, not always immediately. But eventually, it catches up, and every time, the laughter gets a little closer. Just tonight, I tried going back to my place. I told myself I was done running. I had a baseball bat. Every light in the house was on. I took melatonin and tried to knock myself out cold. I must have fallen asleep around 12:45 a.m. At 3:07, I woke up. But not because of the laugh. Because of the voice. It said my name. Just once. Software calm. Like a mother waking her child for school. And then came the laughter. Not one chuckle, not a short burst. A full-on laugh. High-pitched. Raspy. Right next to my head. I leapt out of bed and ran. Didn't even grab my shoes. I drove barefoot to a 24-hour diner and sat in the parking lot until the sun came up. I haven't gone back since, but I swear, every time I close my eyes now, even for a second, I hear it. Closer. Always closer. Like it's crouching right beside me, just waiting for the moment I finally let my guard down again. And if that ever happens, I don't think I'll wake up.